In the meantime, let's talk about all of those matters for consideration with our friends, national security analyst and retired Marine intelligence officer Hal Kempfer and former U.S. ambassador to NATO, Ambassador Kurt Volker, and they join me. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us here. Hal, I want to start with you. You heard there in that soundbite from the U.K. Foreign Secretary David Cameron saying that Israel should respond, but only in a manner that would not escalate the regional crisis even further. What does that mean? How do you define that? What would that even look like?
Andrew, everybody's been trying, I should say, Israel's been trying to do this, Iran's even trying to do this, is to figure out how to conduct this war, if you will. And of course, the big fear is that if there's an overwhelming strike against Iran, that's going to escalate into a wider crisis or a wider regional war. And I think what David Cameron's trying to say is a measured response. Israel is, he also said in the same interview that Israel was going to respond. I mean, he basically made that very clear. The question is what it is. I think it's kind of interesting today. A former Mossad chief talked about maybe they'll hit the nuclear facilities. There's a lot of different ways to parse it. That's a possibility. I've also heard things like a cyber attack, but I think it'll probably be something kinetic but more limited.
So, Kurt, on that front, the message from the West is, well, yeah, Israel needs to respond, but they got to do it our way. Is that what I'm hearing?
That is what you're hearing, and it's frankly a very misguided message in my view. The reality is that foreign adversaries understand power, they understand counterforce, they take into account what might happen to them. By trying to reassure them that say there will be no attack against them, where there will be no retaliation, this gives them assurance and therefore encourages them to keep going. So what I think Cameron is trying to do is thread the needle between the Biden administration, which says don't do anything, and what the Israelis are saying is we must respond or else we will be seen as weak in the region. So he's trying to take an in-between position. Yeah. The right thing to do is establish a position of deterrence where it is clear to the adversary if they do something, there will be a massive response and they will not like it. Okay. And therefore, they should not do it. That's the right position to adopt. We are far from that right now by signaling we won't do this, we won't do that, Israel should not do that. That is only giving encouragement.
I want to put this shot up yet again. This is right outside the gates of Columbia University on the Upper West Side in New York City. These protests are still happening 6 months on from October 7th. We're only in April. This is a presidential election year. Hal, you first. When you see scenes like this with signs that say war crime, with signs that say genocide, these protests are persisting in the 6th month of this war. What calls to mind for you when you see this scene here in New York?
Well, it kind of brings back almost a call to mind of scenes that go back to the Vietnam War. The protests are constantly continuing. They're picking up in intensity. Yes, I'm out here on the West Coast, not too far from San Francisco. There was protests on the Golden Gate Bridge. There's been protests all over California. The valedictorian, who's pro-Palestinian at USC, has been told not to give a speech. So there's a lot going on with these protests. That's putting tremendous pressure on the Biden White House, of course. On the other hand, as Ambassador Volker just said, the war is going on, but Israel has to respond and they have to deter these attacks. And I do find that the messaging, if you will, of some of these protests is convoluted, to say the least.
So, Ambassador Volker, have these protests moved the needle at all for the Biden administration in their response to policy toward Israel or not? I mean, they've been going on almost daily in cities across the country. Are they having that effect, or are they purely, rhetorical and symbolic?
No, they have had an effect on the Biden administration. Every one of those protesters, you can be sure, is going to be voting Democrat, and the Biden administration wants their votes. And so they're trying to figure out how they can portray a less pro-Israel image while not giving up on Israel. So they want to support Israel, but they want to have that plus some sense of, but we're holding back on something, but we're not doing something, but we're doing something for the Palestinians. So it has actually caused the Biden administration to really react to these things.
Yeah. You know, I want to move on now to what's happening on Capitol Hill at the moment. Live Now, look there. We got some of the, monetary breakdowns in the House Foreign Aid version Speaker Johnson put forth just a couple of days ago, and I want to get you guys to comment on this. $26 billion for Israel is in that. $9 billion of that goes toward humanitarian aid for Gaza. $61 billion for Ukraine. $8 billion for Taiwan and the Indo-Pacific. Kurt, I'm going to start with you. Are you optimistic that the House has put forward this plan? The Senate is obviously going to have to grapple with it, but their version in the Senate has been languishing for months. Are you optimistic that Speaker Johnson put this forth and that this can get to President Biden's desk for his signature?
Yes, I am. First off, I know that Speaker Johnson has briefed the White House and reached an understanding about the way that they're going forward in the House. So this is not going to be a surprise to the White House. Secondly, by breaking these things up, you're actually getting a fair vote. You're actually getting the members of Congress to be able to vote. Do you support this aid to Israel? Do you support this aid to Ukraine? What you're going to find is that a lot of Democrats are going to vote against aid to Israel. And that is something that Johnson wants to demonstrate. You're going to find that not that many Republicans, a handful, but not that many, vote against aid to Ukraine. A lot vote in favor, as well as do a lot of Democrats. And you're going to get all of these things through. The Senate will pick this up, stitch it together, and reapprove it themselves, and it'll go to President Biden's desk, and I think it'll be approved very, very quickly. Yeah. The prediction on the House side is votes will take place on Saturday. To me, that kind of indicates that the Senate will act either over the weekend or on Monday, Tuesday, and it'll be signed into law by President Biden on Tuesday.
Hal, to that point, though, I read out the dollar figures there. Is that enough? Is that enough for Ukrainians and Israelis to do what they need to do to prosecute these wars here?
Andrew, the old rule is it's never enough, but it's a very significant amount. It will make a huge difference. $60 billion. Yeah, that's a lot of money. There's a lot of weapons there. There's a lot of things that need to be procured for Ukraine within that, particularly ammunition. That's one thing they're running really short on: air defense missiles, artillery, a lot of other things, but they do desperately need that money. The other thing that doesn't get as much attention is the Taiwan aid. And that's absolutely critical. The time is now to provide Taiwan what it needs to defend itself, to provide that deterrence. And I got to tell you, while everybody's eyes are on Europe and on the Middle East, there's a lot going on in the South China Sea and the Pacific that is very unnerving for a lot of strategists around the world.
All right. Hal Kempfer, Ambassador Volker, we'll have to leave it at that. Always appreciate talking with you about the matters of the world. Such great insight, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew.